Hello everyone, I'm Ash, and if this is your first time to my channel, welcome and thank you for watching. This is a bit of a different video for me because I usually like to stick to the royal space, occasionally delving into pop culture, but for the most part I like to focus on royals or the royal adjacent for the most part. But this topic interests me, and so I like to do videos on what interests me, and that fits that category. So I was able to see a showing of Snow White the other day, and it has been in the media so much that I thought I'd do kind of a little review on it, just share my opinions on what I liked and what I didn't like. And I'll start with what I didn't like. Let's get the negative out of the way, and I will address the elephant in the room, Rachel Zegler. Now, I'm not going to get into her comments in the past, but there's a reason that she's not liked. And even if you agree with her, I think many people are just tired of the constant, I'm the biggest victim who ever victimed narrative. And I don't blame them. I tried to go into it with an open mind because, I mean, she was cast, so surely she has the talent to pull off the part. In an interview at D23, she said, "It's not 1937 anymore."
You said you were bringing a modern edge to it on stage. What do you mean by that?
I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that is
not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
So this is not going to be the 1937 Snow White. Well, that's true. It's not 1937 anymore, but Snow White is based on a folk tale from the 16th century in Germany. So that is the area that needs to be represented. But for the most part, I just didn't really care for her portrayal. I thought that she was good in some aspects, and I'll get into that in the good parts of the review, but I'll jump to the dwarfs. Now, I was predisposed to already dislike the dwarfs based on all the controversy surrounding the comments that Peter Dinklage made and the Little People community speaking out, saying you're taking jobs from us, and I agree with them. Peter Dinklage called the story effing backwards and accused Disney of falling back on damaging stereotypes about 7 dwarfs living in a cave. First of all, Mr. Dinklage, they live in a cottage. They work in a mine, not a cave. But the cottage is the big setting of this movie, and to criticize something, at least have the basic knowledge of the subject matter to talk about it. Disney then released a response saying, "To avoid reinforcing stereotypes from the original animated film, we are taking a different approach with these 7 characters and have been consulting with members of the dwarfism community. We look forward to sharing more as the film heads into production after a lengthy development period." Now, I was firmly in the camp of the Little People who spoke out against his comments, saying it's nice that Peter Dinklage has become rich and famous and fought against some stereotypes in some ways, but there are still so many actors in this community who would love to play stereotypical roles. And how is being cast in these roles that are literally written for them being stereotyped? The 7 dwarfs are not depicted as being victims. They are not disparaged or belittled. They are protective. They are brave. They show kindness to a stranger when she's in need. They show a very interesting dynamic as a family, as friends. These are iconic characters. So where is the stereotype? Why is it such a bad thing for representation when the representation is positive? But like I said, I was predisposed not to like the dwarfs because of all this, and I did not like them. The CGI was awful. The look on screen was just bad. They did not look like they were even in the realm of being real in that sense. You know, it's a fairy tale setting, it's a fantastical setting, but we should still believe that these are interacting with the actual humans, and that was a part of the subplot. They are called magical creatures. They are not humans, but that's no excuse for them to not look believable with all the money Disney can throw at the CGI. You know who else wasn't depicted as human? Gollum. And The Fellowship of the Ring came out over 2 decades ago, and that CGI still holds up. So for the dwarfs to look as bad as they do, I mean, they're cute, they're roly-poly, but they are clearly, I got images of watching Roger Rabbit feeling like cartoons were just placed over and the actors were interacting. Now, I love Roger Rabbit, but that is not what this movie was about. So I'll bring up Gollum again, 24 years later, I believe. it still looks realistic. It's still, you can believe that creature is interacting with the actors. I don't believe that with the dwarfs. The same was true for the CGI animals in Snow White. They looked terrible. They were cartoonish. I understand wanting them to be expressive and have almost human emotions, but it becomes distracting. And I'll bring up another Disney movie, the live action Cinderella, which is 10 years old. It featured mice that were interacting with her, that were CGI, obviously CGI, but they looked realistic enough that you could suspend your disbelief and just enjoy the movie. They didn't do the same with these animals, I didn't think, especially the deer. The deer was just cartoonish in the, I don't want to say worst way. It was decent animation. It wasn't good CGI, if that makes sense. And some of the animals are adorable. The hedgehog in particular, I thought was probably the best of the animals. He was so cute, and it was a little cartoonish, but I was able to overlook it for that one little segment, especially at the beginning when they're trying to open the fairy tale book. And both the dwarfs and the animals seemed to be there for comic relief, I guess, but I realized near the end of the movie I hadn't smiled once. This is a Disney movie, and I didn't smile or laugh at a single thing, which shocked me when I realized it at the end. And that's because the script is bad. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's predictable, so it's just bad. And I don't mean predictable like it's a plot of a Disney movie and you can predict what happens. No, I mean predictable like the dialogue was stilted and dull, and I was sitting there actively thinking the next line, what the next line would be, and then that would end up being the next line. So it fell completely flat, particularly between Snow White and well, not the prince, because there is no prince in this story, so the love interest. But yeah, the script was weak and boring, and I was checking the time frequently, just wondering how much longer I'd be sitting in this movie. But this is a Disney princess movie. I do have a soft spot for those, both the live action and the cartoons. I think they can be pure magic no matter the era. I mean, the more recent ones, the New Age era, Princess and the Frog, Tangled, Frozen, Moana, Brave. It's the independent woman phase. There's nothing wrong with that. My kids were little during a lot of those movies, and so they grew up watching them, and I think I enjoyed some of them more than they did at times. You know, they'd leave the room and I'd still be sitting there watching the movies for the 50th time. So I do enjoy the magic, the fairy tales. And then there was the Renaissance era, which was my childhood, and that was Ariel, Belle, Jasmine, and Mulan. And I'll give honorable mentions to Pocahontas, Megara, Jane from Tarzan, and Esmeralda. I have a major soft spot for Esmeralda. I love her. And even though some of those weren't princesses, they were amazing women. The stories were compelling and interesting. And so then we start drifting into the classic era, and I feel like those people love to demean those films for not being progressive enough. And they don't need to be. They need to be good classic stories that entertain you. We don't need to put a check mark next to the same plot of every single movie. We want to be entertained. I don't want to see Citizen Kane or Schindler's List every single time I sit down in a movie theater. Sometimes I just want to watch Captain America take on Hydra and enjoy some popcorn. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I'll go back to The Little Mermaid in particular for being criticized, because there's often so many inaccuracies attached to it, especially the change for your man that I see. It's a meme that goes around. No, she sang Part of Your World before she ever laid eyes on Prince Eric, and I feel like people forget this all the time. She didn't change for anyone but herself. And she followed her own path and was obviously obsessed with humans long before the catalyst happened that she made that change. And that wasn't even saving Eric. It was because her father destroyed everything that was precious to her, and she reacted. And if you don't see that message, we watch very different movies. But let's continue with the classic Disney princesses since we're getting closer to Snow White. They are not the strong feminist icons, and that's okay. Sleeping Beauty has 18 lines of dialogue in her movie, and she might be the title character, but she is not the star. That movie firmly belongs to Maleficent and the fairies. Cinderella's another one that gets a bad rap, and especially with modern audiences saying that she was waiting around for a prince to rescue her. That woman never wanted a prince. She never sought out a prince. What she wanted was to wear a pretty dress and have a night off from work. I will die on this hill. That is the only thing she asked for in life. She didn't even know she'd met and danced with the prince until after the ball. She did not seek him out. So that's a big stereotype for Cinderella that just irks me anytime I see it. So now we get to Snow White. Out of all the movies I mentioned, Snow White has always been my least favorite. I haven't seen it in years. I don't care for the voice actor in Snow White because of the, I guess, high-pitched, kind of squeaky. I can't really even describe why I don't like it. It's like nails on a chalkboard for me to watch that movie. I had my kids watch it once, but just because it is a classic, but it's not a favorite of theirs either, so it's just not a movie that I've seen in a long time. But I think that might have helped me when viewing this one because I do have the nostalgia. It's actually the first movie I remember seeing in theaters as a very young child. I think it was an anniversary release that came out, and so I do have that little nostalgia attached to it. I don't overly love the movie, however, because I do love Disney movies and I do love classic fairy tales in any storytelling form. So I think it might have helped me to view this one. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't great either. Pretty much everyone I watched it with said that we'd rank it about a C. And the cast was okay. The script was weak, as I said. The CGI was horrendous. The songs were just meh, which shocked me, being that it was a Disney movie. Disney's budget was reportedly $209 million, which it's a lot of money, but I think they spent more on The Little Mermaid. Of course, Little Mermaid would have had more CGI. And that means they will need to make at least $418 million just to break even. And this often confuses people, so to keep it overly simplified, you have the budget for the actual movie, then you have the advertising on top of it, which in general is estimated to be about the same as the budget of the movie. So Disney's having to recoup over $400 million at that point. And I feel like people see the gross listed on the internet and they think, oh, Disney made their money back. Well, you're forgetting the film company only gets a certain percentage of the box office. They have to pay the movie theaters to show this movie, or any movie. Now, there are outliers. Of course, there's Avengers Endgame, Top Gun Maverick, Barbie, those movies that go for weeks and weeks and weeks. They get excellent word of mouth, they get repeat viewings, and they're rare in the grand scheme of the sheer number of movies that are released for every single week, but they're out there. I don't see this being in that category of movie. I don't even see it being one of the biggest live action Disney movies. But I like to be fair, it wasn't a horrible movie. Like I said, I would rate it a C. It was actually better than I expected, but my expectations were low. So I already said what I didn't like about it. I will now say what I liked, and the costumes were gorgeous, absolutely beautiful. The Evil Queen looked phenomenal in every single scene she was in. Snow White's iconic dress, I was initially a little disappointed at first glance, especially in the pictures, but I grew to love it. Seeing it move was absolutely beautiful. The layers of the skirt just had such movement to it that it was really lovely to watch. It really brought the cartoon dress to life in a way that stayed true to the time period, which I feel like some Disney movies have fallen flat on that, especially Beauty and the Beast. Oh, I love the Beauty and the Beast story. I love the movie, but the live action was good. I did not like Emma Watson as Belle, and that dress was so disappointing. The sets and the cinematography were great. It was a very bright, vibrant, colorful film, except for the Evil Queen scenes, which was a nice mirror image to the brightness, but pun intended. There were some excellent shots, particularly the iconic shot of the dwarves walking over the log. And it didn't last long enough for me, but I loved seeing it. I sat there wishing that we'd seen all 7 of them step up on the log and walk over. Just really sell that moment, because that is in so many Disney retrospectives and everything that we've just grown up seeing that. and I felt like it wasn't quite blink and you'll miss it, but I just thought it should have been a little bit longer. Another great moment, which was over too soon, was when the witch is slowly walking up to the cottage, and it has a wonderful angle looking down as she slowly walks toward it, and you get this sense of impending evil is encroaching on this paradise that's hidden. And I found it odd that they didn't hold that shot longer because it really stood out to me. It was a great moment. The apple scene kind of fell a bit flat for me, but the apple is synonymous with Snow White, just like mirrors are, but the visuals were great. The actual scene itself I thought could have been a little bit better, but it holds up. The other live action Snow White movies I feel like might have done it a little bit better. Which I know they weren't Disney, but Snow White and the Huntsman, hated that movie, loved Charlize Theron in the Evil Queen role, thought she absolutely sold it. Mirror, Mirror, if you've never seen that movie, it is Julia Roberts and Lily Collins. I thought Lily Collins was the most perfect Snow White look. She absolutely fit the character. It's such a cheesy movie, and I really enjoy it. I don't watch it a ton, but I just am entertained by it. Julia Roberts is overly campy. I feel like that's the only live action Snow White where the fairest of them all does kind of eclipse the evil queen. No one is eclipsing Charlize Theron or Gal Gadot. It's just not going to happen. But Julia Roberts is beautiful, but Lily Collins, would be a threat to her in that scenario. So that was believable. And I thought the apple scene was very original in that movie. It was done well while still keeping true to the movie. This one stays classic, which I also appreciate because it's based on the classic fairy tale. I'm not gonna, is it spoilers if it's based on a 1937 scene? It plays a little bit better than the cartoon, but I thought they could have extended the drama just a little bit. Gal Gadot, I thought was wonderful. Now, my son saw the movie with me. He didn't like her. He thinks she plays herself in every single movie. And I can kind of get that, but even though I pointed out that Jeff Goldblum has made a career for decades on doing the same thing and it hasn't hurt him, he's still successful and popular. And so, there's a niche for that, a market. I thought she was great. Her casting alone was just perfection for the look. I have a soft spot for the villains in just about any story. And in fact, just a little note, my daughter actually auditioned for Alice in Wonderland, and I thought she had a shot at the lead because she's petite, she's blonde, and she came home and said she was cast as the evil queen, and I was so excited. And she was actually very excited because that was her first choice. She wanted to be able to yell off with their heads off stage multiple times through the play. But I really do love the villains. They're just more fun to watch. And Gal Gadot also had a much better and more fitting demise than the cartoon character. I appreciate change at times, and this had an appropriate end for versus the cartoon version, just like I appreciate nostalgia in what they didn't change. For example, True Love's Kiss. I was a little worried they were going to cut that out, and this is the original movie that set the tone for that plot, so they kept true to True Love's Kiss, and I did appreciate that. They didn't go the Snow White and the Huntsman route or anything. But back to Gal. So the evil queen is tricky because, like Maleficent, you need someone flawless playing that part. You're literally only seeing their face in the costume, and Gal's bone structure certainly shows her as the fairest of them all. Fantastic casting choice, in my opinion. When she walked out with that iconic costume and the crown, and you just see the silhouette of it, it was a perfect look from cartoon to live action. However, her singing left a little to be desired. She's certainly a better singer than I am. I'll give her credit where credit is due. She's not exactly what I expect from a Disney quality singer. And on the flip side, I said that I didn't like Rachel in the Snow White role, but she has a lovely singing voice. Even though I didn't care much for the songs, she sang them beautifully, particularly one called A Hand Meets a Hand. That was the only new song that stood out to me as being kind of reminiscent of a Disney movie and had some subtle nostalgic nods that I appreciated. Whistle While You Work was also fun, although since that's not a new song, I stand by my opinion that the overall 2025 soundtrack is just kind of blah, which surprises me to say that because I really like the songwriters. I've somewhat followed their careers from the TV show Smash, and I've loved so many of their projects right up to Only Murders in the Building. They did the songs last season when they were filming a Broadway play, so I think which of the Pickwick triplets did it? That was such a fun song in that show.
Which of the Pickwick triplets did it? Who of the crew would commit this crime? My little brat make a body go splat.
It's a story pretty gory for a nursery rhyme.
If you haven't heard it, Steve Martin sings, well, Steve Martin, Martin Short, and I think Matthew Broderick came on and sang it as well. So it's just a fun little song. So I enjoy these songwriters, and it shocked me that I didn't like the music in this movie. Maybe I'm in the minority on that opinion. I don't know. I haven't really read any of the reviews, but I expect more from a Disney movie where songs are concerned. But that being said, I do think Rachel sang them beautifully. She has a lovely voice. I haven't seen West Side Story, but I've heard a couple of the songs, and for that reason alone, she was a good casting decision. It also explains why Snow White has awful hair. And I feel bad saying that, but now I know some of you may love it, but out of all the Disney heroines, let's be honest, Snow White is not hair goals. And we learn at the very beginning that the evil queen has sheared off her long hair because of her own vanity, so that was very fitting. I appreciated that little explanation because, let's face it, out of all the Disney females, Snow White just has the worst hair, and I don't mean short hair in general, just the way it was animated, the way the wig looks in this movie is just not very good. So it was a fitting explanation that I appreciated. Look at literally any Disney character that came after and you'll find better hair. I'll bring up Esmeralda again because I love her in that movie. I really, when they get around to remaking that in live action, my bar is going to be set high for Esmeralda. I also love Aurora's hair, but I love the way that entire movie was animated. I love that they modeled the look after pre-Renaissance Gothic paintings. And the final thing that I liked about this movie is the magic mirror scenes. I thought these were phenomenal. The special effects, the overall feeling of those scenes, the voice of the mirror was fantastic. Along with the costumes, these scenes were the favorite parts of the movie for me. It really felt like the cartoon came to life in those moments, and that was a lot of fun to watch. So every time the mirror appeared, that was definitely my favorite part of the movies. I love how it tied into the end as well, and I'm not going to spoil that for anybody, but that about does it. So somewhat of a different video for me, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be getting back to my regular topics probably next week, hopefully. As always, please like, subscribe, and do all the things that everyone always requests that you do, and thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, everyone.